Good afternoon and welcome to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission's Planning Committee meeting. It's January 21st, 2025. It's around 5 o'clock. Was it 5:05? My name is Douglas A. Welton. I am the chairman of the Planning Committee, and we'd like to welcome you to our meeting this evening. We will begin by introducing the commissioners that we have here with us, and we'll begin all the way to my left with Commissioner Lansdell.
Terry Lansdell, Planning Commission.
Will Russell, Planning Commission.
Carolyn Millen, Planning Commissioner. Melissa Gaston, Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. And we will also do staff introductions, and we will begin with Aaron.
Erin Henson, Planning Staff.
Jason Pauling, Planning Staff.
Kathy Cornett, Planning Staff.
Zania Duhaney, Planning Staff.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go on and see what our agenda has for us. We need to get an approval of our previous minutes, and those were sent out to you, is that last Wednesday, Thursday, something like that? One of those days, Wednesday. Do I hear a motion for the disposition of our minutes from a previous meeting?
Motion to approve, Commissioner Millen. Commissioner Gaston, second that motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Millen and seconded by Commissioner Gaston. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And now we will go on to our mandatory referral section of our agenda. And tonight we have 3 mandatory referrals in the party, and we got low numbers tonight. 2025 01, 02, and 04. What happened to 03? Was it a tragic loss?
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn? It was sidelined by the blizzard. Oh my God, we live in a world that is unfair. Given that, do we have any comments, questions? Anybody want to pull one aside? Anything from anyone? Going once? Going twice? We have no comments. So where's our little doodle-bob that we read? And can I get someone to read the motion for us tonight?
Sure. This is Commissioner Gaston. The Planning Committee reviewed mandatory referral reports 2501, 2502, and 2504 on January 21st, 2025, and have no additional comments for the submitting agency.
All right, that motion has been made. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Gaston, seconded by Commissioner Russell. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? There are none, so that motion passes unanimously. For those of you who are staff support to come and help us out with mandatory referrals, we love seeing you tonight. Come back and visit us. We are open 24/7. Go home. Be careful in the blizzard. And remember, we will rebuild after this is over. True. Now we can get on to the exciting part of the meeting now that they've left. And it's, we're being joined this evening by Jason Lawrence from CATS. And Jason, you have a title? What's your super doodle title?
I'll use the Chief Planning Officer with CATS today.
Chief Planning Officer for CATS. Well, the privilege is all ours, and we're excited to have Jason here tonight. We're going to take a look at Better Bus for those of you. We haven't had CATS come in and talk about stuff. You guys have been busy doing some stuff for the last couple of years. I understand that. But an update on Better Bus so that we will be a little bit brighter, more informed when we go make decisions about things. So thanks very much for coming, Jason, and the party is all yours. Drive.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I want to give you all, so it has been, I think, some time since we've come talk to you. I think we've talked to you about Silverline and a few other things over the years, but I think it's been some time that we've talked to you about how the bus system and the bus planning fits into all that from a vision standpoint, but also from implementation that we are considering. And so tonight, I want to give you an update of kind of the overall kind of thinking that we are using to approach improvements to the bus side. And then what are some of the key next steps as we look ahead to the transit system plan update, which is an effort that we'll be taking on in earnest throughout the rest of this year as we look to have an understanding of what we can build with a potential new revenue source on the system, on the larger rapid transit side, but also for the bus component as well. And when the timing's right, love to come back and give you an update on that process.
Look
as well.
forward to that.
So on the next slide, before I get into the detail of kind of what this Better Bus program means, is I would like to mention that we have, over the past couple of years, looked at how do we stabilize our system, how do we improve our reliability and improve our customer overall experience. We've been making upgrades to our CATS Pass app. We have been putting new shelters and benches out. That's a consistent request that we've seen. I'm sure Terry's mentioned that to me many times just 5 minutes ago when we were having a conversation about how do we improve our bus stops. And we have been going through an effort to get a new shelter contract underway, public guard at our stops. And we have been a few upgrades over the past couple of years and we'll look forward to doing more of that. We've improved the age of our fleet, meaning that our fleet is younger than it was 2 years ago. We've been doing some retirees and buying new vehicles. We're conducting a fare study right now. And we're also implementing microtransit, which is an on-demand service in the northern part of our county, from North Lake Mall all the way to the town of Davidson. And that'll launch in mid-February at this point. So we're really excited to do that. But that's just a piece of the puzzle. We do have a number of zones that were adopted back in 2022 by the Metropolitan Transit Commission for microtransit of 18 zones across the community. And that dialogue will be a part of our transit system plan update. And how does that all fit into a fiscally constrained scenario to implement microtransit, among many other improvements?
And Jason, I'll just note that in our March 10th Planning Commission meeting, we will be having a discussion of microtransit, and we've got a couple of folks from CATS. Bruce and Dietrich are coming to
Right.
give us the lowdown on the north.
Yep.
What's it called? Is it the north part of Mecklenburg?
Yeah,
County?
yeah. So
Does it have a name yet?
yeah, right now it's just the northern zone that we're calling
Okay.
now. It's basically North Lake, Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson
Okay.
communities. Think of about 2 miles or so off of I-77 corridor.
Yeah.
But if you got Dietrich and Bruce coming in March, we'll at that point be almost a month in operation. So it'll be exciting.
Okay,
to see how
that's great.
It's going. So next slide. So I did mention a couple of times the transit system plan update. We're beginning a conversation with the MTC, the Metropolitan Transit Commission, tomorrow about what components of the rapid transit plan can be completed with a new revenue source, as well as what do we take from the adopted plan of the Envision My Ride plan in May of 2022 to that can be built from a fiscally constrained model. And so we're excited to begin that process and looking at the microtransit zones, the high frequency bus routes and mobility hubs and bus stop improvements, and put that into a comprehensive plan and strategy that we will begin with MTC tomorrow. So we've been throwing around Better Bus a while now, and a lot of people ask us, well, what is Better Bus? I think I would look at it as an umbrella of activities that we're bringing together to comprehensively re-envision and update and upgrade our bus network. And so part of that will be operational strategies. We're doing what's called a runtime analysis right now. That's a not so fancy term for how do we make our buses run faster and more convenient for operators, but also to the customer. So looking at things like signal priority, but also understanding during the pandemic, we had a lot of time on the road because the traffic had reduced, but now traffic has come back in, I think, in fits and spades throughout our communities. And so how do we understand what is the right running time for all of our buses and getting that right so that we can assign the right resources? So we are got a technical evaluation undergoing for that. Also, where do we need to focus our priorities for passenger, but also operator amenities? So think about if you're a bus operator, there's very few places for us to use the restroom or have a break. Most of the time that happens over at the Charlotte Transportation Center or at a few of our Blue Line stations. So if we're able to spread out more operator amenities throughout the system, we can get to a network that's not so entirely focused on the uptown area. So that's also part of the Better Bus initiative. Determining what level of high frequency can be implemented across the county. How many routes can we take to 15-minute frequency? Because that really is the hallmark of a high frequency corridor. So I think at 15 minutes, 4 times an hour, that's when an individual may not necessarily have to look at a schedule as frequently if it's 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and certainly when it's an hour. How do we implement microtransit throughout the county? And what is that implementation strategy from a fiscally constrained standpoint? And customer experience, all the things that we need to do to make our system more approachable, easier to understand. And so that if a person can look at a sign and say, that number or that color means a frequency, or, right now we have a lot of legacy names and numbers throughout our system that have been around for 60+ years. A lot of systems are moving towards a more color coded or more number based, so that if I look at a route that's 100 series and it's yellow, I know that's a 15-minute route, versus today, all of the signage, all of our signs says, like 9 Central Avenue and it's green. So there's right now, I think there's a way to make our signage and our system a bit more approachable. So we'll be having some customer experience strategies. And ultimately, how do we rate the performance of our system to make the most efficient, reliable network that we can? So all of those things will be boiled together into the Better Bus Initiative and will be folded into the transit system plan update.
Jason, if I may?
Sure, yeah.
Is it okay
Yeah.
for questions?
Sure.
Yeah. If you're on that previous slide, I gave a conversation had this past week regarding NCDOT's leading pedestrian interval policy. And the notion that we had was talking about the failure of NCDOT to understand preemption for leading pedestrian interval. And I was listening very closely to you, and you said prioritization. So can you talk a little bit about maybe the Better Bus Plan, what the plans are to prioritize signalization for buses versus preemption? And preemption really is associated with emergency vehicles, where there is a communication device that allows the lights to change immediately versus prioritization. And I'd like to maybe kind of just 30 seconds to
Yeah, sure.
talk a little bit about that if
So
you can.
the way that we're approaching it, so in the city of Charlotte, CDOT does most of the signal timing and the cycles of each of our intersections. And so what we're working directly with CDOT to get a better understanding of what's the best way to approach how to give buses greater priority. And so one approach that we have looked at is, so if a bus route is say 2 or 3 minutes down from its scheduled time, that can in real time communicate to the SingLead system to get greater green time to get us back on schedule. And then when we're back on schedule, we no longer need that priority. So what we're working with them was more of a real-time communications. And that's really a dance between how we schedule our routes and the signal timing, because if it's green for us, that means it's red for somebody else. And so how does all of that interplay work together? So we've been working with them on a couple of key corridors to test that out. I think we're looking at Beatty's Ford at the moment to test that, to see for the route number 7, to see how that can play out across our network. So I think for us, it's more on being on time is more important, essentially getting through the corridor as fast as possible. Yeah. And so part of, all the things I just mentioned have some tie back to some level of infrastructure. So improvements at signals, bus stop improvements, buying more buses so that we can have greater frequency, hire more operators. How do we work through the accessibility, connecting pedestrian infrastructure, ADA compliant bus stops, getting creative about fare payment. For us, as relates to the bus side, you're looking at like seconds to improve. And if you can collect a lot of seconds along the route, you can get greater improvement of travel time. So if you can pay off vehicle for your fare, or if you can get more green time, all that adds up for efficiency across the network.
Jason, can I ask you a quick one here? How many buses are in the fleet currently? Is that an improved number over the previous year? Because you talked about, lowering the age, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And is there an anticipated number that is a target for rolling out Better Bus? And that may be a part of the process, but
Yeah.
I don't know where you guys are with that.
Yeah, I think, right now we have enough buses to run the frequency we have today. And just to give, caveat, we have one route within our system that is 15 minutes or better. That's the route number 9. And we have a handful of routes around 20 minutes throughout the day. It's Beatty's Ford Road, a few others. And the vast majority of a network is 30 minutes and 60 minutes. And so to get to a higher level of frequency, we're going to need more vehicles. So that could range anywhere from 80 to 90 new vehicles to come into the fleet. But we also got to filter in replacement with that as well. Right now, we've been focused on getting some of our older buses out and getting replacement in. So we should have somewhere around 70 some vehicles throughout this year come in, but they're mostly for replacement to improve the age of our fleet.
This is totally off.
Yeah.
What do you do with an old bus?
So they are stripped of whatever is on there that we need that could be used in other pieces of the fleet or
Okay.
anything that's from a data standpoint, and they're put through auction.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Millen, you,
Follow up from what Douglas was saying real quick. To increase the fleet, you obviously need drivers to increase, and I don't know how much this is true, but what I've heard is we can't even staff the fleet we have currently. So how are we currently on staffing and that perception that we do not have enough staffing drivers?
So it is our goal, I think what maybe Carolyn, what you're getting at is the ability to make service every day. And I think over the past couple of years, we had some issues with not being able to make all of our trips. We had something back in 2022, we had upwards of 10% of our daily trips were being missed through staffing. We made some adjustments in our schedule and that stabilized. And so far, throughout 2024, we were getting close to less than 1% on a daily average of missed trips. So I think by and large, we'll have some days that, if it's inclement weather but by and large, we have stabilized our workforce, but we're watching it very closely because we are constantly hiring to manage our attrition rate. But in order to do the frequency that we want to do if we're able to get new revenue into the system, then yes, we would need an increase in operators as well. But we think we have by and large stabilized that piece yet. Absolutely. But we are monitoring that very closely because that could change. Absolutely. Okay. So just a quick, the next slide. And so quick, just to kind of frame where we are in the Better Bus effort. So we started back in 2023 with a technical effort to lead into some initial public outreach in phase 1 last summer. And then in the fall, we came out with some initial recommendations. And since the fall, we've been working with our system plan update team to understand how this fits into the broader comprehensive effort. And we'll be coming back out in the late winter, early spring with our initial recommendations to be folded into that effort. And what that will essentially look like is how many routes can go to 15 minutes frequency? What is the system level standpoint? Are all routes no more than 30 minutes? How many microtransit zones can we do? How many larger transit centers? How many bus stop improvements? And that's what those recommendations will look at when we come out in the fall. In the spring. Next slide. Yeah.
Recommendations come out. I'm assuming there's gonna be a dollar amount attached to those, or are you guys still, does the fiscally constrained model say, oh, and here's some dollars, so you kind of have to figure out what you're gonna.
So the improvements that we'll identify with this will be covered under what has been proposed to be the funding breakdown, where 20% of a new revenue would go towards bus. So we have a healthy amount that's going towards bus, and we feel confident we can make some significant improvements on the bus side with that.
I'm a fan.
Me too. So we've heard all the things on the screen here. We've heard this over the years, but certainly through our public involvement for Better Bus, what we've heard generally from the public is can you make it easier for me to use the system? Sometimes when people go up to a bus stop, which direction is it going? How do I know where it's going? How to make the app easier to understand and use? How do I make the call center easier to use? Simple things like can I text a number on a bus stop just to tell me when the next bus is coming? So just basic stuff that we've heard. How do I make it easier to use the system, easier to understand, easier to trip plan? Everybody wants to get somewhere faster. I don't think anybody gets on a bus or any kind of mode of transport and say, can I get there as slow as I possibly can? I want to get there faster. And so, but that's a balance, right? Because you also need to pick up individuals. So you do have to make bus stops to achieve that. But how do you locate bus stops in a way that makes it to maximize the use of signal priority? I mean, very technical, down in the weeds. Should it be on the far side of a bus stop or the near side of a bus stop? Just how do we develop standards for that so that we're comprehensively looking at locations of our amenities? And then also, how do we improve the bus services in communities with limited mobility options? I mean, digging into from a population standpoint, where are people living that absolutely need essential services and essential access to jobs, and making sure that that is where we roll out our frequency improvements first. And then ultimately, how do we build better crosstown connections so that you don't always have to come downtown to transfer, And that by and large can be achieved by improving our intersections to facilitate better transfer between routes. But also microtransit will be a big component of that as well.
Quick question on
Yep.
that. Are there are there hubs for microtransit? I just remember the map with lots of little dots. So and we'll get that at a later date, but I'm just thinking right now, are there hubs? Because I can think of some shopping centers. We'll pick one and say South Park or something.
It'll be helpful, certainly. Yeah, I mean, and the north is the furthest along in that. If in
okay.
each of the towns, there's, North Lake has a park and ride. Huntersville has two. Cornelius has one. We're looking to create a place in downtown Davidson. But essentially, where are those places where you can connect with other fixed route, or express routes,
Okay.
or where can the vehicles come together to make those transfers? So yeah, ultimately, they'll need some facility, something that indicates where that happens. Now, it'll look different depending upon the geography and what's available. But that's why I think we're excited about the northern towns. I think it's got a lot of those things in place. But think about places like Eastland or the Albemarle Park and Ride at Lawyers Road or South Park or any of the Blue Line stations. All of those can facilitate that kind of movement. Yeah. So how do we, to get back to what we've heard, how do we achieve that is really understanding how people are moving today. I mean, there was a seismic shift at the pandemic about how people move and travel. So what we've tried to understand through this effort is where have trips recovered? Where are there potential gaps? And how has the work from home changed travel markets? And so in very kind of broad strokes, what we have seen is that since the pandemic, auto trips have recovered faster than transit trips. Now, I will say that's probably could be also a function of our inability to add a lot of frequency. So, more frequency drives ridership and more ridership drives frequency. So I think that as we are able to put more frequency out, then I think the transit trips will have a better opportunity to recover. But we also feel that as we think about how people move throughout the day, that maybe just the traditional peak in the morning and peak in the afternoon for people who come work in uptown office may not be the best time to look at how we look at where to focus frequency. So we do think there's greater opportunity to look at service throughout the day being consistent so that there's not, I'm at 15 minutes from 7 to 9, I go to 30 minutes in the midday and then 15 minutes at 3 to 5. If we can create a system where that frequency is spread out consistently, then that reduces that kind of schedule anxiety that we think happens today. And then also we're seeing a greater share for special events on the weekends. So we do think there's opportunity for market share there too.
A quick question. Is there any thought about not making a distinction about service between weekends and weekdays and just doing a specific, say, 30 or 45-minute interval across every day except for maybe a major holiday? Because that seems to be a reason why weekend ridership would be down.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing certainly is just the Blue Line, for example, like today, like a Saturday looks like a Thursday or Friday compared to like what it was pre-pandemic. We're just seeing a lot more special event, a lot more weekend ridership occurring. But I also think that depending what kind of work that you do, that if you're in retail or if you're in a job that, it could be hourly wages, that Saturdays is just as important to you as a Friday or a week or a Thursday. And so that'll be a part of the recommendation, understanding maybe not every single route, but I think some of our core routes. I mean, we have, for example, route number 9, a single route today carries 10% of our entire bus ridership. In the top 5 routes carry close to 30% of our ridership. So if you start thinking about where you invest into those, then I think there are some opportunities on the weekends. So that'll come out as we kind of get an understanding of what the financial model looks like.
Quick question. 9 is Central Avenue,
Central
right?
Avenue, yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Can you just off the top of your head, top 3, 4 routes?
So not, 7, 9, 27.
Okay, can you?
Yeah, but
I'm sorry.
in geographical
Okay,
terms.
sorry.
Yeah.
Central Avenue, Albemarle Road, Beatties Ford Road, Monroe Road, and I believe that the North Tryon route is in there as well, the 11. But we can get that to you. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. It's just like this all revolves around me. So it's like, what's close to me that's one of your essential routes or something like that. I'm just trying to figure out if they were you know, how well they're used, because those are the things that I'm familiar with, seeing people standing out waiting for the bus.
And what we're focusing on, corridors that we would want to put higher frequency in, it would be the ones that make sense, I think, when you start thinking about where ridership comes from today and the destinations that are there. So it'd be like Wilkinson Boulevard, Freedom Drive.
Yeah.
Beatties Ford Road, Central Avenue, North Tryon, Park Road is a pretty strong route as well, all the way to
Yeah.
Plainville. So to be those kind of like key corridors into the city is where we'll be focusing the higher frequency.
Okay, all right, sounds
That's it.
good.
Yeah. So how do we take that information? We still need to understand, that's kind of the broader strokes of how our travel patterns changed. But to really understand need, we have been doing what's called a transit propensity analysis that looks like at various levels of information of, vehicle households, households without vehicles or one vehicle, senior, disabled populations, minority and low income, and then also understanding where all the jobs are. And so we've taken that type of detail and boiled it down to two maps. And on the next slide, I think like simply put, as we think through like what can transit cannot serve every single trip in a community, but it can serve a number of like a subset of trips. And we do think that the job trip is a trip that we should be focusing on. That's our greatest market share and ability. So where are the jobs and where are the people that need to get to those jobs? And so as we look at kind of broadly, what we've seen from a transit propensity is that for people who are transit dependent, those who absolutely need transit, there's clusters of that along East Charlotte area. There's clusters along the Tuckasegee and Freedom Drive area. And then you see in every pocket of our community, there are areas of people of the highest need. And so understanding how do we serve that first is most important, but then how do we connect them to where the jobs are? And so on the left-hand side of the slide, there are clusters of jobs in the university area, Uptown, of course, South Park, some of the retail establishments in Matthews, but a large concentration of jobs in the Westinghouse area, and then into the airport and the Amazon distribution facilities further out Wilkinson. So as we develop these recommendations, we want to be very careful that these are the kind of connections that we're making. So that if you're on Central Avenue, Albemarle Road, if you're on Monroe Road, how best do I get you to a job off of Westinghouse? Knowing that's probably going to take some transfers, and how do we make that seamless as much as possible? So that will be how the recommendations will lay out. How do we do that first? And then how do we serve the rest of the county after?
That was a very enlightening slide. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to double down on that one, just if you don't mind hitting it back, if you can hit it back one more time. I mean, that affects my decision profile for looking at rezonings and where we're gonna put people and where we're gonna rezone and allow that potential development to happen. And, I'm translating Teresa here and looking at the, out that area. So, and towards Dorada and going, wow, there's some great opportunities, but that is a great slide to have. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so how do we achieve that in recommendations? It's really, how do we understand those travel trends? What is the market potential? Where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck when it comes to where we're going to put frequency first? Because in any new scenario, the first, 5 to 10 years of this plan will be bus focused, because that's what we'll be able to do quickly. That's what we'll be able to roll out on the street quickly. And so it'll be really important to understand what market are we able to gather. Then understanding where those gaps are for a fixed route. When I say fixed route, that means just a bus route. A microtransit being on demand is not a fixed route. And then understanding how do we prioritize and develop performance measures for microtransit, because it is new to us. And how do we develop a system that is accessible, but also is refined from our zones that we adopted back in 2022. And then just to bring the timeline back up, as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, that tomorrow we'll be presenting to the MTC some of our initial thoughts on what we can achieve on the Better Bus component of the financial plan, but also what we can achieve on the broader rapid transit plan. And then we'll be working with them and the public throughout the winter and spring to talk about those recommendations and ultimately come up with an adopted plan that blends our bus plan with our rapid transit plan. So we have a unified single plan together that shows how all these elements work together in a cohesive manner. And with that, I'm happy to take any additional questions.
all right, Commissioner, Carolyn? Did you? Go ahead.
Couple of questions. On the microtransit, I was at a city council meeting and they were getting an update And of course, they said they were starting to pilot up in northern towns. So Councilwoman Renee Johnson asked, well, how about when could we maybe get in University? And he said, well, that would be the next spot. Well, then I asked a question after the meeting and said, well, what are we looking at time-wise on it going full scale? So if you start up in northern towns, then University, and you get out to our wonderful East Charlotte area, they were saying it could be 20+ years. So that time frame, when we need so much in transportation in, especially moving people, and as the map showed, so many people in the East Charlotte area that have to depend on bus to get to jobs. Is there any way that, I mean, I would love for, if the northern towns are gonna do the pilot, that maybe the next pilot comes out to East Charlotte and goes that way, but you know, that's my utopia world. Do you think it is actually 20+ years we're looking at for microtransit to really get anywhere in Charlotte?
Yeah, so what we're working through now is understanding, you know, as it fits into a financial plan, is what can we do in 5 and what can we do in 10? Because that's really that kind of early years for the bus piece. And I think as we talk to MTC, you know, beginning tomorrow, we'll have a better understanding of that. But what I think is challenging is understanding what's the priority of that, and from a performance standpoint. That's the piece we're working through now. I think where you heard that discussion in the university area, we have 2 routes that are fairly underperforming that operate within the research park area, which makes them a good candidate for a more on-demand service. They have fairly low passengers per hour. Whereas on East Charlotte, some routes, like the routes that go to the Eastland Transit Center or the Almore Park and Ride, do fairly well. So I think let us get through these early conversations, and we can certainly come back on what the timeline looks for that. But that's kind of more of our focus. And ideally is understanding what we can fit within the 20%. I hope we could compress that timeline.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I just have one more question. When y'all are deciding on creating covered bus stops, is it for every mile or every 3 miles, or just versus just the pole being in the ground? How often are you looking at, or radius wise, having covered bus stops for the most?
Yeah, so what we have, you know, prior to 2022, our service standards, and Terry remembers this because we brought this to TSAC, that the way we looked at, you know, creating shelters or benches or waiting pads was primarily focused on ridership. And so if you were 25 or more boardings, you got a shelter. I think it was like 15 or 12, you got a bench, and after that it was a waiting pad. And so what we did with the bus priority study in 2022 was make a recommendations that really shouldn't be focused solely on ridership. It should be a piece of it, but usually your highest ridership stops were also your most frequent corridors. And so you're actually waiting less out in the elements. So if you were waiting longer, you know, you might have a greater need for protection from the sun or the wind and rain. And so we created a new way to score all of our stops that looked at not only ridership, but also frequency, but also location to affordable housing, to healthcare, to education. And so we took that and created a new priority structure that gave every single stop a score. And then we used our severity of like ADA improvements that needed to happen to help rank and prioritize that. And then we went through a kind of an understanding of making sure that was spread throughout the county. So now we have a score. We have from 1 to 3,000. A lot of them have the same score because we have 3,000 bus stops. And then developing, and right now, like our true limit to roll that out is funding and resources, because it does take time to go through real estate. And so we're doing in batches of 50 and 60 right now. And so we've got our first design package together. We have, I believe, it's put out 25 improved stops over the past year. We got another bucket. So we're just going down the list right there. Now, new funding will help with that, because that is a limitation right now to really go quickly with that. But that is part of what we're thinking. Like, how do we, instead of improving stops that meet our ridership or criteria, is like we should have a program to improve our bus stops, and just kind of a shift in how we think about it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Gaston?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the microtransit. So if I'm correct, and I'm not up on the latest and greatest. I'm deficient in that area. However, for your microtransit, you said that you focused on areas. So when you did the northern areas, North Lake, Huntersville, and going up, you looked at areas that had ride and park and rides, whatever you call them, right? Ride and transits. What do you call them?
Well, up there, it just happens to be park and rides,
The
like
par-
in other
the-
places, there's transit centers like along Central and.
Gotcha.
Davis, yeah.
So I know that initially they had talked about having microtransit in the North End area, like that North Tryon, Statesville area, or Graham Street. And I see that it's changed. And I was like, is that because there are no park and rides in that area? Because what was the deciding factor in that? Like why you pull it from an area that is heavily transit dependent and heavily on the affordable housing spectrum. So the majority of or a great percentage of the individuals who live in that North End corridor do have service related jobs. So they're going traveling back and forth to service related. And so they may have those sporadic hours where that regular transit isn't available, but yet you pick another area that people have cars and they can park there and then drive whether they want to or not, but they can drive. So what was the decision factor in that?
Yeah, so I'll start with like why we started with the northern communities first. In that area, we have 3 routes called the Village Riders that currently operate there. They operate at 60-minute frequency. And they operate from North Lake all the way to Davidson. And then we do have pockets of need along there, and 60-minute frequency is just really hard to build your life around. And so we felt like those resources that we use for that fixed route would be better within other, to put greater frequency throughout the network and reliability. So that was a good place to start with in such a large geography. And so I think that's why we picked that as a first bat. Whereas like places like, Hidden Valley or along Graham Street, there is fixed route there that is not the best frequency we can put out there, but it's not 60 minutes. And so that was some of the factors that went into play for that. It was a good place to test that out because it already had facilities to make those transfers easier to make. Now, within the total build out of microtransit, we'll send a list of zones to you, but there is a microtransit zone in the area that you speak of, in addition to Hidden Valley. And as we seek to understand how to roll out new zones, it'll be a part of the Better Bus discussion with MTC that'll start tomorrow. So it's not that we don't have it in the plan. It's just that we started with the northern towns first.
Okay. I'll reserve mine for next month.
Good, okay.
It'll be, I think, as we go through understanding the clarity of like the staging of these zones throughout, then I think it'll help us understand how to better connect those communities with kind of the blue line, because there is a kind of with the rail yard there's a bit of a barrier to connect over to their microtransit can do that better than fixed route, we feel like. And we are looking at within Hidden Valley to create a more direct route along Sugar Creek to connect the Rida community to the Blue Line station and have more of an on-demand service within the Hidden Valley community. But I think the timing of that will become clear as we work through how we can what we can afford and when we can afford it within the total plan. But there is a zone in that community.
Do you know what zone? Do you know what zone that is? Like when you said it's in that community, where is
So,
it?
I mean, in the North End, Hidden Valley, I mean, we're thinking about holistically from, say, the Graham Statesville Road area up to, say, like the Sugar Creek to Rida. There's a number of zones within that area. We can send a list and a map that
Okay,
helps with
that
that.
would be
Yeah,
great. That would
absolutely.
help. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen the map somewhere,
Yeah.
but I don't know where, but.
Yeah, we can send,
it's
I
a
mean,
fine-
there's a map from 2022, but as we went through the Better Bus Initiative, understanding what we can afford, there's been some updates that we can share certainly with you all.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Commissioner Russell?
Jason, thank you. I know I missed part of the microtransit discussion, but I want to understand this. It sounds as if CATS is going to be owning and operating the microtransit by the way you describe it. Is that correct?
And so, yeah, so it'll be, we will have a contract. We put out an RFP, and through that RFP selection, we selected MV Transit, which has a partner, My Little Helper, that will be supporting them as well. And then we have Spare, which is the technology component, and they're working together to deliver the microtransit project. Now it'll be branded CATS, and we will be managing that. Down the road, we may do that ourselves, like what's called self-perform, where we own the vehicles and hire the operators, but this will be a contracted service to start with.
Has there been any thought given to, instead of just handing it over or bidding it out to one company to do the whole thing, to look at maybe spreading that wealth into smaller microtransit companies throughout the city who could provide that service?
There's nothing preventing us from doing that. And then one key strategy for separating the technology from the operator was so that we have a technology that can help with the matching a vehicle with a rider. If that's separate, then the way we've structured it, we can bring other operators on throughout. So there's nothing preventing us from doing that. I think we want to see how the Northern project rolls out and what works well. And then we can have those discussions for future zones.
Yeah, I was just thinking that in that scenario, I think it makes sense to have one technology provider, but
Yeah.
is there a way that we can use some people locally who could have some could start some micro transit companies that could then tie into that technology and use it to help offset some of that, so CATS doesn't have to wait 20 years to get to the other parts of the city? That answers my question. Thank you.
Jason, I'll throw a question here, and Terry, you South Park Community Partners has been running a microtransit service around the mall. Have you guys been talking back and forth? Are we learning lessons from what I would assume? I mean, whenever I drive through the area, I feel like I see one of the skipper cars, so
Yeah.
they're obviously moving folks. Have you all gotten some lessons learned back from the folks at South Park?
Yeah, I mean, they just, I can't remember the exact date, but they had just launched that, and we did work with them in the lead up to coordinate like stop locations. They have some signage on our bus stops. There's connections at our transit center there. So we were really intentional to make sure that it was clear communication. We even pushed and promoted it through our CATS Pass app. So if you could see like the details
Okay.
from there. But we haven't had an opportunity to circle back with them on how it's working yet, but certainly we will be doing that.
Okay,
Because ultimately, like, we want to, create a system that you can go seamlessly between whoever wants to do microtransit. That's a good example of that.
okay. All right. Terry, and I'm going to let you be the last question on this.
Quick on this one. A couple things. You said you hadn't looked at South Park for comparative for that smaller piece, but have you looked at Wilson? Have you looked at Gaston County? To sort of see the best practices, to see whether or not there's a revenue burden or relief in the transition to an on-demand service?
Well, I think what we have tried to characterize this as, this is not a way to save money. I think some communities look at microtransit as a way to save. I think we see it as a way to augment existing services. It's another tool within our kind of toolbox of mobility options. It's hard to compare exactly what Wilson and what Gastonia did, because in both of those instances, they took their existing bus system and converted it completely to microtransit. And that's not what we're talking about here. We see it as a way where we have, say, maybe a fixed route that's not performing as high as it should be, or it's at a level of frequency that's not good for the community, and microtransit is a way to fill that gap in a more nimble way. Where, honestly, where maybe the land uses and the population is not at a level that supports like a fixed route, where you need more dedicated resources. That's how we're thinking about it. It's a question of cost. I think we'll see how this works in the northern towns, and we could better answer that.
I would imagine that somebody's going to ask that on the dais in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask for you is that as we work to replace the aging diesel fleet and the aging bus fleet, there's not a lot of difference in price breakout from a 40-foot bus to a 30-foot bus.
Yeah.
Is there an intent at CATS to replace same for same? In other words, are we going to replace a 40-foot bus with a 40-foot bus moving forward? Is that still, I would imagine it's going to be the operating procedure right now, just to make sure we get a good, solid over-the-road fleet to manage our.
Yeah,
Thinking. Or?
Yeah, over time, I think the 30-foot buses will have less need for those, because if we do more microtransit, those typically operate in areas where we had 30-foot buses. And then, yeah, it would probably be more of a 40-foot. We are moving forward with, new purchases, or either electric or hybrid, and we're buying a lot of hybrids to replace our older diesel. Those are fleets. So.
Thank you. Yeah, that bus procurement and the ownership of the vehicles is always a burden on the operating system budget over the long term. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jason, for coming to hang out with us. We will have you come back. As I said earlier, I know Katz has had some things on their plate the last couple of years. But this was very informative. I think we've got at least 5 of us who are smarter than we were when we walked in the room. And whoever comes to do the microtransit thing, they're just in for it because we're going to be loaded.
I'll give them a heads up.
We're going to be loaded for bear. Anyway.
We'll share with you all once we, some of the conversation we had today, so there's some clarity around what routes we're looking at for frequency improvements, which zones are included in the plan, and then more of the kind of the timeframe.
Yeah.
But we'll get that to you.
Yeah, we want to do a CATS thing, but with the, proposed legislation, all this stuff kind of, everything's in a little bit of limbo. And so it kind of kept getting kicked down the road. And once all of that gets resolved, if it does get resolved, then we'll have you back.
Well, I think it's important with, while this has been in a while, it's important to be ready when
Yeah.
funding is available, and we want to try to be ready as much as can, or even, the hint of it. And I will say, working really closely with Kathy and Catherine and other people, Monica on the team about working with the community area planning work as well. So.
Okay, cool beans. Thanks very much. You are free to go. Be careful in the blizzard. Do you have your snowshoes? Yeah, Sean is not coming tonight because she's like, I don't want to get caught in the snow. Yeah, thanks, Jason. And again, I hope you have Connect Beyond snowshoes. That would be. Yeah. All right. Yeah. God. Swag just has no boundaries, does it? The Joint Use Task Force is our next agenda topic. And Jason, are you going to do this? I will just say that the Joint Use Task Force is this mysterious thing that stuff just comes out of. Because I asked a long time ago when I joined the Planning Commission, well, can I come to one of their meetings? And they're like, well, no, not really. So I am assuming that you all get together wearing black robes in a mostly dark room and push a little thing across the table. And it's like, oh, I'll take that one, right? Thank you for coming, Jason, because we want to know what's going on. And I will turn it over to you, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Enlighten us. I may have gotten the things wrong that I just said, by the way. Yeah. So
No black robes, sorry, no. But thank you and good evening. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Committee, happy to be here to discuss Joint Use Task Force, specifically our 2025 process and schedule moving forward. I'm glad you brought this up. So basically, the Joint Use Task Force is a staff level committee originally created in 1995, and it's shortly after in 2000 we added. It's mostly been city and county discussion of joint projects. In 2000, we added the 6 municipalities in the county in a resolution to include in these discussions. The primary purpose of this group is to discuss projects and plans to see if there are partnership opportunities, basically, in order to achieve maximum public benefit. And this is also where the mandatory referrals that you guys see every month are discussed on a staff level. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, these meetings have been virtual for the last several years, virtual only. So here's a summary of the roles and responsibilities of the Joint Use Task Force, which were in place several years prior to the comprehensive plan. The meetings they take place once a month. And many city and county departments would discuss a variety of capital projects and acquisitions, to collaborate ways to find partnerships and to align investments. And as I mentioned, it has more routinely been used to discuss the submitted MRs and the process that goes behind getting those staff reports to you guys every month, and the issues around the reuse or the shared use of public property. So that's been kind of predominantly what we discuss. This slide summarizes the various departments and divisions within the city and county. It's a lot of groups here that get our distribution list, and others that are generally included in our discussions. Again, mandatory referrals. This is something that, as you know, you're familiar with. You had 3 of them tonight. Those are actually required by the state legislation as far back as 1973. That has been revised twice, and it essentially mandates the process that I just described through the Planning Commission for their review prior to an acquisition of any kind or project being implemented. And again, this applies to city or county-owned county projects, properties. It does not apply to town-owned properties or projects, but it does when there's a county-owned or a city-owned project in those towns. Then they're discussed in that on that level. Our staff has basically simplified the MR process in recent months. We've collected the following information that you see here, and then process the staff reports that you see each month. So there's a lot of staff work that goes into that. And we have now started to include information about conformance to the 2040 plan based on that in a staff comment section. Also recently, we have started an implementation subcommittee, which is another group that was formed after the adoption of the 2040 plan, whereas the implementation of the comprehensive plan policies are discussed along with other projects as kind of the umbrella for the joint planning efforts that we discussed. And these meetings typically also happen virtually on a bi-monthly basis. And here are some of the plans and some of the updates that we have gotten and some of the studies that we have discussed in the past couple of years. A lot of these things you've seen, we've had one of them discussed tonight, but there's a lot of things that are happening either at the same time or already have happened or are coming up. And so we see it as a good opportunity to get people, you know, even though it's mandated, to get us talking about these projects on a staff level. And here are some potential updates that we hope to cover in the coming year. And some of these topics may also be discussed by the Planning Committee as well. These are just some past project examples that, you know, some of this discussion originated at the Joint Use Task Force level. And a lot of collaboration came from that, whether it be shared land, resources, funding, multiple goals, efforts, and collaboration went into a lot of these projects. Some other examples is, you know, you see a greenway project and a stream restoration project or a sewer project, anything that happens on a creek level, and coordination behind the funding on that. We see a lot of coordination between tree canopy preservation and Parks and Rec on, you know, parks and also schools when there's some opportunity to share funding or share land. And so basically in 2025, what we're moving to is we're going to continue to have monthly Joint Use Task Force meetings where we'll discuss the MRs and some projects before you guys meet. And then we're going to also go to a quarterly joint coordination meeting that will be live and in person. So we're going to get back to some of that live and in person that we've been lacking for the last couple of years due to the pandemic. And that gets us back face to face. The next one will be March the 5th, which will be here. And then I believe that June 4th, we're lining up a meeting to be at the airport. So those will happen March, June, September, and December, location to be determined. So basically that summarizes kind of our efforts. So just generally, basically the work that goes into the Joint Use Task Force is a staff level, and a lot of the maps that you see on the mandatory referrals and the staff reports and any of the information comes from that. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jason. I will accept that you have debunked most of my mythology related to the Joint Use Task Force. Anyway, but I do appreciate the work the Joint Use. Once I understood what you all were doing, I describe it as horse trading for whatever is available. And I've seen that come through. I think a lot of times when we've gotten rezonings, particularly if there was a purchase of some land that belonged to CMS or some other entity, we know that it's been offered up to everybody, and basically, you know, it got through the process and came to us in that way. Anybody have any questions for Jason? Nope. Commissioner Lansdale.
Great to have that meeting schedule. I'm not sure I know that that was available online anywhere, but I appreciate that to kind of, that's right.
Black robes.
No, I think that's the subcommittee. That's the Black Road folks. Because we don't know who's on that, but I guess one thing I would like to maybe ask about is how do we manage? I know it's really about that land purchase and usage and that as the foundation, but I'll look at funding opportunities and how we make those procurements and decisions, especially when you have project creation. Right. I think that was early on your slide that talked about that. Where do the municipal service districts fall in the joint use task force? Are they a secondary? And I see some of the listings of the partners here, and I'm like, okay, I can see where I see university there. I can see that, and I can see I can see them in the shadows, but municipal service districts by state have access to dollars, have project ideation, have project implementation, have allocations of resources, not only state and local, but actually their tax revenue base. Do they have a place in the joint use task force?
So Center City Partners listed there as one, and I believe that, so they also participated in the, MSDs did in the phase 3 of the community area plan, outreach, and in that process as well. I believe they're on our implementation subcommittee, the other two. So Center City Partners would cover Uptown and South End. Then there's also, University City Partners, and then South Park. Believe they're on our implementation subcommittee, which is the one that is more connected to the comprehensive plan implementation that meets bi-monthly.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. They do have a seat at the table because a lot of what Joint Use Task Force does is really, how can we pair dollars together to save money, number one, and, get more for our money as well. So they are part of the process.
And really, I come at it from a specific kind of chip on my shoulder. I think the one thing that came up with Center City Partners was about this public bathroom situation that we had last year or over the past 2 years, in which the Center City Partners said we should have the city county pay for those public restrooms when, as part of the municipal service district, that is a service already taxed for that purpose that we didn't embrace and have that opportunity. That's that one kind of piece. I think about South Park, and you heard JL talk about integrating the shuttle bus stops with the cats, but I see this integration piece that maybe we maybe have a better opportunity, especially when I look at university now and South End. We have access to dollars and special tax financing that we may have better usage potential if more people understood how it was allocated. So I'll just leave it at that as a soft political statement.
Jerry, I think I would say that you were referring to some of the silos that perhaps exist in our local. But, again, if they're there, I would hope that they have equal ability to horse trade with their resources. Now, of course, if I've got the money, you're going to pay for it. We go out to eat and you're paying. I'm going to eat a lot. I'm going to get the most expensive thing on the menu. And so, yeah. Anyway.
The one thing I'll clarify is that this is a staff level group,
Yeah.
which is why the, black robe type comments. And so we will work at a staff level, but some of those funding decisions don't happen within this group. So I just want to make that clear. We're trying to get back, part of getting back to being more frequent with in-person is to be able to, before it's baked into a mandatory referral is when these discussions need to happen. And we're trying to get back to bringing those ideas forward at very early levels so that those discussions can happen earlier and earlier in the process. And then there's time for funding decisions and other political decisions to happen outside of that process.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of Zoom calls, and you guys have heard my comments about virtual meetings, so I won't even go there again. But I think when you're in person, the side conversation that happens when you go to the bathroom or right before when everybody's in line to get food is the thing that's going to help those meetings be more successful. So I will let us roll on to our next topic, and that would be community area planning update. I'm rolling, all right? Yeah, community area planning update. And which one of you,
I'll
you're teeing it
give
up?
you the update, and Aaron's going to help me with the slides. And this is pretty much the similar, if not exact, presentation that you saw last week. But I think it's valuable to just, in case there's any other questions or comments throughout the process. So again, talking about what community area planning is, I think this group is very, very familiar with that. Really starting to give a flavor of what you can expect, because I know there is concern about 14 area plans and the volume of that. So what you can expect to see in those plans, and also next steps and opportunities for future engagement. Because one thing that we really want to stress is that the release of the plan documents really begins a whole nother phase of engagement and public comment. So it's by no means the end, it's really the beginning of a new phase. So as you all already know, we're doing 14 plans over a 2-year process. They involve policy map refinements, identification of projects and programs. And then there's other things that will be included in the document, illustrative concepts, which we'll give some examples of, and then the implementation strategy. And it will result in the revisions to the policy map, which those are already online. And also the policy map manual, which describes how the policy map can be changed. Those pieces help you, again, when the commission, zoning committee is evaluating rezoning petitions. Those are two pieces that will be very helpful in that, in addition to the area plans themselves.
And guys, I sent you out an email today, but I will send out, and I saw it and forgot to include it, pointer to the policy map. That's the current.
The revised.
Revised, almost, it has to be approved policy map, and also the policy map manual, which I took a look at today, which is very easy to get through. But I just want to make sure you guys get that, and I forgot to send that, so I will get that to you shortly.
And as you already know, we are in phase 4 of this process. We're actually, phase 1 was setting the stage, the community reports that are online. Phase 2 concentrated on, that was the 42 workshops around making tweaks to the policy map. The result of that was a revised policy map. Phase 3, projects and programs that focused on what are the other partners involved in this, and what are projects and programs that that are available or are needed to help realize the vision. And then phase 4 is putting all of this together in actually compiling all this information into the area plan. So a lot of what is in the area plans are things that we've already had online, talked about in meetings. It's just all in one place, and we're not talking about it in hypotheticals. People can see it, and it's much easier to react to something that you can see. So we're at that point right now. Phase 5 would be review and adoption. And again, the revised policy map and manual was there was a 6% change to the map overall. And I think that is both internal and external engagement. And I think what that tells us, comments on the map have been steadily decreasing. We can have a lot of confidence in the map itself. Phase 3, which I talked about, projects and programs, that was what we just wrapped up this fall. So there were 8 different meetings on cardinal geographies. So 4 in person, 4 virtual, focusing really again on our partners. The comments that we've received really the most across the board, general mobility is really the one that gets the most comments, followed by strategic investment areas. And then after that, it's a split between open space and sustainability and placemaking. And I would say that those topic areas throughout the process and even throughout the comprehensive plan have been things that have risen to the top as well. And this is again where we had the web tool that was available too, and we received quite a few comments and views through that tool. So an outline, there is a program guide that really focuses on aspects of the process that and the framework that apply to all of the plans. And you can see an outline there. that focuses too on citywide policies and an explanation of how those apply within the plans themselves. And then documenting the engagement summary, glossary of terms, that sort of thing. Then we'll have 14 different area plans that have 5 chapters in each. Move to the next. The community profile, so chapter 1 really gives a summary of what we would call existing conditions, so land use, building form, infrastructure, et cetera. And again, this is information that is available online, kind of giving you a lay of the land of what's out there today for each of the geographies. Next chapter focuses on community needs and goals. So we know there's 10 goals within the comprehensive plan, and we know all of those are important. But this again is one piece that can help you in reviewing rezoning petitions, help council in reviewing capital projects, et cetera. For each of these areas, what are the greatest needs? And then looking at those needs, what are the 4 to 8 goals within the comprehensive plan that help address those needs? And how does that play out in this particular geography? So it'll help you with some sort of prioritization for each of the geographies. What are the greatest needs in that particular area? And then when we talk about creating complete communities, how does the policy map and its recommendations play out in terms of that? So recommendations for future development that are in the policy map. And then what does that look like change over time? So explains how the policy maps advance those priority goals and address the community needs. So you'll begin to see kind of a story being told for that particular geography that'll help you when you're evaluating rezoning petitions is really kind of what you all know best, but also other projects and programs that in particular areas. And then as far as projects and programs go, we know that it's not just land use that helps create complete communities. There are other projects and programs related to mobility, open space, community character, and public services. Those are the topic areas that we focused on in phase 3 of the process. And this, again, will connect those to the greatest needs of each of the geographies and, again, help with some prioritization. In addition, there's a piece that's called a neighborhood toolkit that's kind of a pullout document in the comprehensive plan that if you look at all of the different mobility, access to housing opportunities, et cetera, what are the projects and programs that fall into each of these buckets that are already existing today or that are new, so that if a neighborhood leader is interested in improving community character in their neighborhood, they can turn to that chapter and see what are projects and programs that I may be able to take advantage of, what's needed, who do I contact, et cetera. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all of that information.
Kathy, can I ask a question about that? Is there any way that that part of the document can go or be sent directly to the self-identified community leaders within those geographies? I know Housing and Neighborhood Services has that list, but it's kind of like self-maintained. So the integrity of it may not be great, but it would seem to me that I'll pick a neighborhood. We'll pick Elizabeth. It's that way. Their president would love to see this, whatever geography they're in, or any place in town. If we could get that directly to those folks, I would think that that would be a big win for us.
We could certainly look at that.
Yeah, and
be happy to.
particularly it would just have to be that section in a certain way. It'd be great if it was actually a physical document or a little booklet. Not that I'm asking for a lot, but that would be great.
Yeah, we're happy to look at that.
Okay, just an idea.
If I may
Commissioner Lyson.
piggyback on that, just to understand that kind of project and program list. Is that going, just for the record and for me, I'm not sure I know the answer to this, but is that going to include all the fiscally constrained projects previously approved in our long-range transportation plan and our SPOT 6.0, SPOT 5.0? What list of projects is that gonna,
So this is
especially
more
for the mobility side?
Yeah, the neighborhood toolkit is more programmatic, so it's programs. It doesn't specifically list projects. Those projects would be listed in the implementation section of the plan.
And does that section,
That's, I don't even want to go ahead. That section is
Nope,
not
it is
adopted.
coming
Yeah.
up? Yep, okay.
It's more of a spreadsheet that we work with our partners on what to include in that spreadsheet. From a CRTPO type example. As far as what's in there, it is not adopted because one reason is it doesn't commit funds. And it also allows staff to update it and change it without having to take it to council each time.
Yeah, I'm gonna dwell down on that one just for a little bit. I don't want to go too deep here, but I guess what I'm looking for is that we may know that we have a funded project, and right now I'm thinking of the pedestrian bridge across 277, been on the books for a while, funded, but would something like that be on that spreadsheet?
Yes,
Would-
it could be. Yeah.
Could be. So we had a submitted for a road project on Odell School Road or whatever. I'm just making that up. And spot 3.0 8 years ago that was approved for funding, but yet has not been built. Are we getting to that level
Yes.
to include in that list of things to have our small area plans condense for us or?
Yes,
Trying to figure out where that line is where we don't include.
it is, and because it isn't adopted, we can add to it as needed, again, without having to take it to council each time. So it's really more of a staff tool and to help us determine what kind of progress we're making too as well.
Oh, I think it's, if we're having to sell it to the communities, right? If I'm having to sell it to South Charlotte and saying, hey, there are 10 projects for roadway improvements on the books already. And let me show it to you here and let me show you to it in this space as well. That maybe would help kind of make that connection that this is a real document. It's related to real things that are going to happen in this neighborhood. And it makes it all in this kind of consolidated area. That's where I'm trying to get to. I know it's a lot of work, but I was just trying to figure out, Kathy, where that kind of Excel spreadsheet was gonna, start and end and those kinds
Right,
of things.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, not only if you know what projects are coming or may not be funded, at the rate we're growing, some of the things that may have been great 10 years ago make no sense now.
Right.
So is that now an opportunity to clean up some of these lists and
It is.
prioritize them?
Yes, definitely.
Because
Definitely.
I'm gonna just tell you from my area, there are a whole bunch of road and infrastructure projects that in 2005 made the world of sense. In 2025, they make 0 sense. And I think they need to be reprioritized, removed, or reimagined so that we are providing exactly what we've asked for in terms of infrastructure and then also get real community feedback on those things.
Right. So at the workshops, part of what was available were those projects and programs for the public to comment on. And then we have shared all those comments with our partners. And then part of what we're working on now is individually meeting with each of those departments and partners to craft not only their section of the plan, but then the implementation guide and matrix as well.
I will piggyback on theirs and ask the evil question of, so how often does this get updated? Because we had Neil in with CRTPO, and Terry, you probably know, there's like whatever, they update the plan some periodically. Was it 5 years that they update the plan? So are we in the middle of an update right now? Or I think they are. Well, they're doing the 2055 plan.
Yes.
And will you guys get that? And next year, will they be doing something else or somebody else will be doing something? And I guess we
Right.
just have to make sure these plans stay up to date.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
That,
So.
I'm not saying anything you guys haven't thought about.
Yes, so as far as the comp plan is due for an assessment every 5 years, we're looking at changing that cycle, which mean we might have to stretch it out a year in order to sync up with their process better.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because the processes, especially from a growth projection standpoint, they're interdependent on one another. And we want to make sure that we're lined up. It'll just make it easier for
Yeah,
us. They're federally mandated. They have their cycle.
Mm.
We would need to sync up with theirs. And
Yeah.
we've been talking about that.
Yeah, my first thought was that somebody's gonna have to go through this, not the whole thing, but every periodic, once a year, once a quarter, whatever, because there are going to be new projects coming in a continuous stream. But that would make some sense if everybody got on the same song sheet, so to speak.
Right. We also have an implementation program area in long-range planning that Gretchen is the program manager of.
Oh, okay.
And so that is part of their work, is tracking that as well.
Okay. All right. That's why they pay her the big bucks, I think. I won't tell anybody that you make more than them. Don't worry about it.
So review and adoption, we plan to release the documents in early March. We have been meeting with council individually by district, going to get them ready, the same sort of information that you all have been hearing. We've been to council committee. We plan to host other council sessions, go back to committee, come back to this body, full planning commission, et cetera, and also have opportunities for the public to ask questions in office hours, some format like that. We're still working through that.
You're still working on, are there going to be, as soon as there are dates for things, if you're going to do public gatherings, please let us know, because I would like each member of this committee to be, I will assume there are going to be multiple meetings, but we'll smear
I
ourselves
would
out.
imagine there'll be more of like virtual office hours or us at a library,
Okay.
not workshops or anything.
Not a workshop?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I just want to make sure that if we have an opportunity to listen in, we get that.
Yeah,
So,
and it
okay.
would be more of the style if someone had a particular question or wanted to make a one-on-one comment, that sort of thing.
Okay, all right. We will work with you.
And that's all I have. If there's any other questions, happy to answer them.
Everybody, we good? We're all looking forward to this because we love reading. And that's exciting. And we like to dance too. And that's always important. I think that takes everything off of our agenda for this meeting. Our next meeting is a month from now. Is your birthday? There will be cake, Cinia. There will be cake. Oh, and it's going to be near Melissa's too. And both of these ladies finally able to drink because they'll be 21. So I think that, yeah, there will probably need to be some cake, whatever. That does it for tonight, folks. There a motion for us to adjourn this thing.
Motion.
All right, that's been done. We will accept that motion and thank you all for hanging out. We'll see you all sometime soon.